Hello and thank you for joining us on the Capitol Report on NTD television. I'm your host, Steve Lance. On the lawn of the National Mall today, lawmakers joined with activists to push for tighter gun laws. Congressional leadership was there, and Democrats told NTD where their bottom line is and what they're looking at for baseline proposals. NTD's Melina Wisecup has the story.
I'm here on the National Mall where activists and lawmakers who are pushing for gun reform have laid out a visual representation of the more than 40,000 American lives that are lost due to gun-related deaths each year. And this year, the orange flowers represent an increase of 5,000 gun-related deaths over the past couple of years.
Democrats, Republicans, everyone, we must never stop fighting. Fight, fight, fight.
The former Congresswoman was a victim of a shooting in 2011, and she was severely injured. She then founded an organization dedicated to saving lives from gun violence. Her organization Tuesday displayed these tens of thousands of flowers at the Washington Monument as a way to put pressure on the Senate to act.
As Majority Leader, I made clear that the Senate will vote on gun safety legislation in the near future.
Many who were present at the event pushed for the need to raise the minimum age to 21 to buy a gun. This is already the law in 6 states, including the Republican-leaning state of Florida.
We passed a law that actually required a 3-day waiting period, but we should do anything that we can and pass any bill we can because it's worth saving even one life. And look, the effort in the Senate, I think, is very tentative.
Senator Blumenthal, who's involved in the Senate negotiation talks, tells us that raising the minimum age may not be possible right now in the Senate.
But I recognize we're not going to do everything that we want. If we can save lives, it's a step in the right direction, and it reassures Republicans that they're not walking off a political cliff.
Blumenthal says the baseline for any gun reform is red flag laws, which would make it a federal law to temporarily take guns away from a person who is deemed to be a threat to themselves or others. He and other Democrat lawmakers tell NTD why they feel federal government should get involved.
Only the federal government can have a national background check. Only the federal government can effectively ban ghost guns. Only the federal government can ban assault weapons.
Equal protection under the law and the right to remain safe is something that everyone in this country deserves, and we need federal legislation that sets a minimum floor.
The House is expected to pass a legislative package of gun restrictions this week, but the Senate needs more time for negotiations. Right now, a group of senators is working to find middle ground on gun reform that could get enough Republican buy-in to send to the president's desk. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
The debate over gun rights continues to wage on as individuals debate their interpretations of the Second Amendment. Over the weekend, we had a chance to sit down with Congresswoman Lauren Boebert of Colorado to get her thoughts.
Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Congresswoman, the Second Amendment debate right now is raging, and I just want to get your thoughts as to what the temperature is in Colorado and around the country.
Well, unfortunately, Americans are waking up because they are paying the prices for these bad policies. And unfortunate for the Democrats, they know that they are going to lose in a landslide in the midterm elections. So they are trying to pull out every dramatic crisis that they can to drive their voters out to the polls. First, we saw it with the unprecedented leak of the SCOTUS decision, possibly, and that just created all of this turmoil all throughout America of people saying that this was going to end women's rights and abortion rights, but really we would be saving thousands and millions of lives. And now they're using these crises like the terrible shootings in Uvalde to take our Second Amendment rights away. And they are doing that to drive out their voters to the polls. We see this time and time again. But what's unfortunate is these mass shootings are such a small percentage of deaths resulting from a firearm. Look at Chicago. Look at the thousands of deaths that take place just in Chicago alone. If gun control actually worked, it would be a liberal utopia and there would not be any crime there. But all of those deaths are broadly ignored. And something like Uvalde happens, which is absolutely terrible. It it grabs the hearts of people all throughout the nation, and Democrats latch onto this to take away your right to defend yourself.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that it's more of an emotional debate rather than a constitutional one.
Absolutely. We're still investigating what actually happened in Uvalde, and suddenly there's at least 8 firearm bills that they're wanting to bring to the House floor when we're back in session next week. And supposedly this is their cure to what happened in Texas without an investigation actually taking place. They're wanting to have a ban on magazines and ghost guns. Well, none of that was an issue there in Texas. And in fact, we're still looking into the police officers' response and what took them so long to actually get in there and neutralize the threat. So this is a knee-jerk reaction, just like we see each and every time. But I am 76% sure that they are not going to take our guns.
On that note, I was just going to ask you, how important is it for people to reflect on history, to really understand and remember as to why we actually have the Second Amendment?
Right. That is the most important thing. These were regular armed citizens, our founding fathers, and they are the reason that we have peace and prosperity here in the United States right now, because as armed citizens, they said, we will not have a tyrannical king rule over us. We will no longer be oppressed. We will be free men. And it's so important to look back on that and why the Second Amendment was actually added to the Bill of Rights. It is to protect us from an overreaching tyrannical government. It has nothing to do with hunting. Our founding fathers, they just got done liberating themselves from tyranny, fighting a war. They didn't just come back from a hunting expedition when they drafted the Second Amendment. So this is so extremely important to remember why we need these firearms for our own protection and to keep government in check. That is we the people. That is our responsibility to do that. And of course, know your history, because we do have old Joe opening up his mouth and saying things like, the Second Amendment, whenever it was written, you could not buy a cannon. But there were Gatling guns, and that was a pretty high-powered machine, fully automatic, really. And I think you could own a cannon, too.
I want to get your thoughts real fast on the midterm elections. There's a lot of fascinating races. You're on the campaign trail yourself. What are you hearing from actual people on the trail? What are the issues that are driving the midterms, you think?
The issues that are driving the midterms are certainly inflation, supply chain issues, and our wide open southern border. I mean, these are things that are impacting all of us. With fentanyl flowing into our country, it's the #1 killer of 18 to 45-year-olds. And here in Colorado, my opponent in the primary actually voted to decriminalize fentanyl. 4 grams used to be a felony in Colorado, and he voted to make that a misdemeanor. And so this is something that is impacting our communities. It's killing our children. It's killing so many people in our communities. And then also the impact that it has on our law enforcement officers who are having to deal with this influx in crime all throughout Colorado. But we certainly need to tackle inflation. I think that starts with being energy independent once again and pursuing energy dominance. That is how we begin to tackle this inflation issue. And of course, our supply chains, when we have empty shelves and baby formula shortages, this is a problem for everyone. And shut down the southern border.
Congresswoman Boebert, thank you.
Thank you so much.
The Department of Homeland Security says in an advisory that the nation is likely to enter a period of increased violence. This is ahead of turbulent national debates taking place, including upcoming elections and a possible Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says that the nation is in a heightened threat environment and that it will, quote, become more dynamic in the coming months. The DHS statement was the 6th National Terrorism Advisory Bulletin since January 2021. The advisory says that the DHS expects the threat environment to escalate as high-profile events may be exploited to justify acts of violence. Where is inflation going, and did we see it coming? Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen today faces grilling by lawmakers over the administration's policies. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more.
Testifying before the Senate Finance Committee on Tuesday, the Treasury Secretary admits again that she misjudged the path of inflation.
When I said that inflation would be transitory, what I was not anticipating was a scenario in which we would end up contending with multiple variants of COVID, and I was not envisioning impacts on food and energy prices we've seen from Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
She says she could have used a better term than transitory, adding,
I do expect inflation to remain high.
The testimony comes days after Yellen admitted she was, quote, wrong last year when she said inflation would go away quickly. And Republicans are now pressing her on whether Biden's policies, including what they call excessive stimulus spending, have made it worse.
Secretary, do you agree with the San Francisco Fed that the nearly $2 trillion March spending package was a significant causal factor in the high, increasingly broad-based and accelerating inflation?
Senator, we're seeing high inflation in almost all developed countries.
Soaring gas prices are also drawing debate. Yellen points to oil companies, though some senators disagree.
They're sitting on thousands of leases on federal lands that they have not yet drilled, and
but
certainly
the permits
can't
for
do so.
proceeding on those leases are not being facilitated. And, I mean, the president's executive orders have shut down the Extel pipeline.
And an expert on the energy industry tells NTD that permits for other pipelines have been delayed.
So if the administration were to say, we're not stopping people from drilling, drilling wouldn't work if you drill and have wells and then you can't get the oil to a refinery because the pipeline permits are being held up.
And Secretary Yellen is likely to face more grilling on these hot-button topics on Wednesday when she appears before House lawmakers. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Iris Tao, NTD News.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.